During physical therapy, I overheard my daughter whisper, "That old woman isn't worth $200 a day." She didn't know the insurance covered everything. The next day, I revealed I had $2 million in the bank. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The physical therapist's hands were gentle as she guided my leg through the range of motion exercises, but nothing could have prepared me for the emotional blow that was about to hit me. It had been 6 weeks since my hip surgery, and while my body was healing, I was about to discover that my relationship with my daughter had been rotting from the inside. "Just a few more repetitions, Mrs. Henderson," Sarah, my therapist, said with that encouraging smile I'd grown to appreciate during our sessions. "You're making excellent progress." I was lying on the therapy table in my living room, the same room where Milani had insisted we set up my recovery station so I wouldn't have to navigate the stairs. At the time, I thought it was thoughtful. Looking back now, I realize it was the first step in her plan to control every aspect of my life. The phone rang, and I heard Milani's voice from the kitchen, sharp and irritated. She must have thought I couldn't hear her over the sound of the equipment, or maybe she just didn't care anymore. "I'm telling you, Derek, this is getting ridiculous," she hissed into the phone. $200 a day for this physical therapy nonsense. The old woman barely moves anyway. My breath caught in my throat. Sarah noticed my sudden tension and paused the exercise, but I motioned for her to continue. I needed to hear this. I know, Milani continued, her voice dripping with frustration. "But what choice do I have? She needs the therapy, apparently. Though honestly, Derek, I don't think she's even trying. It's like she wants to stay helpless, so I have to keep taking care of her." The words hit me like physical blows. Old woman. Helpless. The casual cruelty in my daughter's voice was devastating, but what came next was even worse. "The insurance better cover this because I'm not paying $200 a day out of my own pocket for someone who's probably just going to end up in a nursing home anyway. This whole thing is just... God, I can't wait until this is over." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Sarah could hear it. She was professionally pretending not to listen, but I caught the concerned glance she shot toward the kitchen. Even a stranger could sense the poison in my daughter's words. I closed my eyes, trying to process what I'd just heard. $200 a day, but my insurance covered physical therapy at 100%. I'd checked the paperwork myself when Dr. Martinez recommended it. Milani knew this. We'd reviewed the coverage together when I was discharged from the hospital, which meant she was lying to her husband about the cost. But why? "Mom, how's it going in there?" Milani's voice suddenly changed to that syrupy sweet tone she used when others were around. She appeared in the doorway with a forced smile, but I could see the irritation still lingering in her eyes. "Wonderful, dear," I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. "Sarah says I'm doing well." "That's great to hear," Sarah said, beginning to pack up her equipment. "Same time Thursday, Mrs. Henderson?" "Of course," Milani answered before I could respond. "I'll make sure she's ready." After Sarah left, the house fell into an uncomfortable silence. Milani busied herself in the kitchen, clattering dishes unnecessarily loud. I stayed on the therapy table, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I'd overheard. 28 years ago, I'd held my newborn daughter in my arms and promised her the world. I'd worked double shifts as a nurse to put her through college, co-signed her student loans, helped with the down payment on her first house. When her father left us when she was 12, I'd been both mother and father, attending every school play, every graduation, every milestone, and now, at 68, recovering from surgery that had left me vulnerable and dependent, this is how she spoke about me when she thought I couldn't hear. "Mom, you should probably get some rest," Milani said, walking back into the living room. "You look tired." I studied my daughter's face, searching for any sign of the caring person I thought I knew. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her clothes expensive but understated. She looked successful, put together, normal. How had I missed the coldness in her eyes? "Milani," I said slowly, "about the physical therapy costs." Something flickered across her face. "What about them?" I was just wondering if there were any issues with the insurance coverage. You seemed stressed about something when you were on the phone. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Oh, that. No, everything's fine. I was just talking to Derek about work stuff. You know how he worries about expenses. The lie came so easily, so smoothly. How long had she been deceiving me? That night, I lay in the hospital bed Milani had rented for the living room, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. Every kind gesture from the past 6 weeks suddenly felt different. The way she'd insisted on handling all my paperwork, how she'd taken over scheduling my appointments, the concerned looks she gave visitors when she thought I wasn't watching. I'd thought I was lucky to have such a devoted daughter. Now I wondered what else she'd been lying about. The next morning, I was going to start finding out. The next morning brought more than just my usual coffee and toast. It brought a revelation that would change everything I thought I knew about my life over the past 6 weeks. Milani had left early for work, claiming she had an important meeting. For the first time since my surgery, I was truly alone in my own house. The silence felt different now, not peaceful, but heavy with secrets I was only beginning to uncover. I decided to do something I hadn't done since coming home from the hospital. I got my own mail. The effort to walk to the mailbox was exhausting, my hip protesting with each step. But I was determined. Milani had been helping by bringing in the mail every day, sorting through it and only showing me what she deemed important. I'd been grateful at the time. Now I was suspicious. Back inside, I spread the pile of mail across the kitchen table, bills, advertisements, medical statements, and there it was, the insurance explanation of benefits for my physical therapy sessions. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. The statement was clear. Amount charged, $200. Amount covered, $200. Patient responsibility, $0. So, I'd been right. The insurance was covering everything, every single session, which meant Milani's phone conversation yesterday had been a complete fabrication. But if she wasn't really paying for my therapy, why was she complaining about the cost to Derek? I kept sorting through the mail, and that's when I found the second shock. A letter from my book club, expressing their concern about my extended absence and hoping I was recovering well from my serious complications. Serious complications? I'd had a routine hip replacement. My recovery had been textbook normal, according to Dr. Martinez. What complications? My phone rang, startling me. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Sherry, dear, how are you feeling? Milani mentioned you'd had some setbacks with your recovery. Setbacks? I tried to keep my voice level. What did she tell you exactly? Oh, she said the infection had gotten worse and that you were having some confusion issues, memory problems. She seemed so worried about you. The words hit me like ice water. Infection? Memory problems? I'd had no infection, and my mind was as sharp as ever. What was Milani telling people? Mrs. Patterson, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm doing quite well. Actually, no infection, no memory issues. There was a pause. But Milani said you weren't up for visitors. She's been so protective, screening all your calls and telling everyone you needed complete rest. After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Milani hadn't just been lying about the insurance costs. She'd been systematically isolating me, spreading false information about my condition, making it seem like I was sicker and more vulnerable than I actually was. I reached for my phone to call my sister Janet, only to realize I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. Milani had been taking my calls, telling everyone I was too tired or confused to talk. She'd created a barrier between me and the outside world, and I'd been too trusting to see it. The sound of keys in the front door made me quickly gather up the mail. Milani was home early. "Mom, what are you doing up?" she asked, her eyes immediately going to the mail scattered on the table. "You should be resting. I was just checking my mail," I said, watching her face carefully. "Got some interesting letters." She moved quickly to the table, her hand hovering over the insurance statement. "You really shouldn't be worrying about paperwork right now. Let me handle this stuff." "Actually, I'd like to read my own mail, thank you." Something flashed in her eyes, annoyance, maybe even anger, before the concerned daughter mask slipped back into place. "Of course, Mom. I just meant, With your confusion lately, I didn't want you to get overwhelmed. There it was. The lie she'd been telling everyone. My confusion? I kept my voice carefully neutral. What confusion are you referring to? She fidgeted with her purse strap. You've been a little forgetful since the surgery. It's normal with the pain medication and the stress of recovery. I see. And you felt it was necessary to share this information with the neighbors? Her cheeks flushed. I just wanted them to understand why you weren't your usual social self. People were asking about you. I nodded slowly, studying her face. 28 years of being her mother, and I was finally seeing her clearly. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced. She'd probably been perfecting these skills for years, and I'd been too blind to notice. Milani, sit down. We need to talk. She remained standing, her posture defensive. About what? About the fact that my insurance covers my physical therapy completely. About why you're telling people I have memory problems when I don't. About why my sister hasn't called me in 3 weeks. The mask finally slipped completely. The concerned daughter disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I don't know what you think you heard or read, but you're obviously confused about— I'm not confused about anything, I said firmly. And that's the problem, isn't it? You need me to be confused. You need me to be helpless and dependent so you can control everything. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something calculating in her expression. Then she smiled, but it was cold. Mom, I think you're having one of those episodes again. Maybe we should call Dr. Martinez. The audacity took my breath away. Even caught in her lies, she was doubling down, trying to gaslight me into questioning my own sanity. But I wasn't the confused old woman she wanted everyone to believe I was. And tomorrow, I was going to start proving it. 3 days after our confrontation, Milani brought Derek over for what she called a family discussion. I knew the moment I saw his uncomfortable expression and the manila folder in his hand that this wasn't going to be a casual visit. Derek had always been polite to me but distant. He was one of those men who left all family matters to his wife, preferring to focus on his accounting practice and golf games. Seeing him here, in my living room, with official-looking documents, set off every alarm bell I had. Sherry, Derek began, clearing his throat nervously. Milani and I have been talking, and we're concerned about your living situation. I was sitting in my recliner, the one Milani had positioned to face away from the kitchen so I couldn't easily see what she was doing. Now I understood why. She'd been staging my environment, making me appear more helpless and isolated than I actually was. My living situation seems fine to me, I replied calmly. What exactly concerns you? Milani sat forward on the couch, her hands clasped together in what I now recognized as her concerned daughter pose. Mom, you nearly fell yesterday trying to get the mail. What if something serious happens when no one's here? I hadn't nearly fallen. I'd been a little unsteady, yes, but that was normal for someone 6 weeks out from hip surgery. But I could see how she'd frame it to Derek, how she'd turn my natural recovery process into evidence of my declining abilities. Derek opened the folder and pulled out several brochures. My heart sank as I recognized them immediately. Assisted living facilities. We've been looking at some really nice places, Derek said, his voice taking on that overly cheerful tone people use when they're trying to sell you something you don't want. Places where you'd have help available 24 hours a day, but still maintain your independence. Independence? I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. How is moving me into an institution maintaining my independence? It's not an institution, Mom, Milani said quickly. These are beautiful communities with activities and social programs. You'd make new friends, have people to talk to. I have people to talk to. Or I did, before you started telling everyone I was confused and couldn't handle visitors. Derek looked puzzled. Confused? Milani said you were having some memory issues, but I didn't realize. I'm not having memory issues, I said firmly, looking directly at Derek. I remember everything perfectly, including conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. Milani's face flushed, but she recovered quickly. Mom, this is exactly what we're talking about. You're becoming paranoid, thinking people are talking about you. People are talking about me. You're talking about me. Right now, to my face. About putting me away. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Sherry, nobody wants to put you away. We just want to make sure you're safe and well cared for. And what about my house? My belongings? My life? Well, Derek cleared his throat again. That's part of what we need to discuss. The house is a lot for you to manage, and the property taxes alone. I felt my blood pressure rising. The property taxes that I've been paying without any help for the past 30 years? But Mom, Milani interjected, with your limited income from Social Security and the small pension, it's going to become a real burden. Limited income. I almost laughed out loud. If she only knew. Derek pulled out more papers. We've gotten some preliminary estimates on what the house might sell for. After paying off the remaining mortgage and covering the costs of moving you into one of these communities, there might even be a little left over for your care. There it was. The real reason for this sudden concern about my welfare. They thought my house was my only significant asset, and they were planning to liquidate it to pay for warehousing me somewhere. Have you chosen a facility already? I asked, keeping my voice level. Milani exchanged a glance with Derek. We've narrowed it down to a few options. There's one called Sunset Manor that has a really good reputation, and their rates are very reasonable. Reasonable. Translation, cheap. I'd like to see the brochures, I said. Derek handed them over reluctantly. As I flipped through them, my heart sank further. These weren't the upscale retirement communities with golf courses and spa services that I'd seen advertised. These were basic assisted living facilities, the kind where people went when their families wanted them cared for as cheaply as possible. Sunset Manor's brochure was particularly depressing. Shared rooms, scheduled meal times, limited visiting hours. The activities consisted mainly of bingo and craft time. The whole place looked institutional, despite the cheerful language in the marketing materials. When did you visit these places? I asked. We haven't actually visited yet, Milani said quickly. We wanted to talk to you first. Another lie. I could see it in her eyes. She'd already been to these places, already made arrangements. This conversation was just a formality, a way to make it seem like I had some say in the matter. And what if I don't want to move? The silence that followed was deafening. Derek looked at Milani, clearly expecting her to handle this objection. Mom, Milani's voice took on a patronizing tone. You're not thinking clearly about this. You can't live alone anymore. What if you fall? What if you forget to turn off the stove? What if something happens and no one finds you for days? What if? I repeated. You're creating problems that don't exist to justify a solution I don't want. This isn't about what you want, Milani snapped, finally showing her true colors. This is about what's safe and practical. Derek looked startled by his wife's sudden harshness, but he didn't contradict her. I see, I said quietly. So this isn't a discussion. This is you telling me what you've already decided. We're trying to include you in the decision-making process, Derek said weakly. No, you're trying to manipulate me into agreeing with decisions you've already made. There's a difference. Milani stood up abruptly. This is exactly the kind of stubborn, irrational behavior we're talking about. You're not being reasonable, Mom. I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Someone who saw me not as a person with rights and feelings, but as a problem to be solved, an asset to be managed. I think you both should leave now, I said calmly. Mom, leave, now. After they left, I sat in my recliner, staring at the brochures scattered on my coffee table. They had this all planned out. They were just waiting for the right moment to put their plan into action. But they had made one crucial miscalculation. They thought I was helpless, dependent, with limited options. They had no idea what they were really dealing with. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Milani had to fly to Denver for a work conference, something she'd mentioned reluctantly, as if leaving me alone for 3 days was an enormous burden. She'd arranged for Mrs. Patterson to check on me twice a day, which I now understood was really having me watched. But Mrs. Patterson was 74 herself and certainly wasn't going to be monitoring my every move. For the first time in weeks, I had real freedom to investigate what my daughter had been up to. I started with the guest bedroom where Milani had been staying since my surgery, ostensibly to help with my recovery. She'd moved in completely, bringing clothes, work files, and personal items. At the time, I'd been touched by her dedication. Now I saw it for what it really was, a complete takeover of my life and home. The room was meticulously organized, just like Milani herself. Her laptop was gone, taken to Denver, but she'd left behind a filing system that would have impressed any office manager. I found folders labeled Mom's Medical, Insurance Claims, Financial Planning, and most ominously, Housing Options. My hands shook as I opened the Housing Options folder. Inside were detailed brochures, price lists, and application forms for 6 different assisted living facilities. 3 of the applications were already filled out in Milani's neat handwriting, complete with my forged signature. But it was the notes paper clipped to each application that made my blood run cold. Sunset Manor, $3,200 month. Accepts Medicaid after private pay period. Waiting list 2 to 3 months. Golden Years Residence, $20,800 month. Immediate availability. Shared rooms only. Peaceful Acres, $4,100 month. Private rooms. Doesn't accept Medicaid. She'd crossed out Peaceful Acres and written too expensive in red ink. I sat heavily on her bed, trying to process what I was seeing. My daughter had not only researched facilities without telling me, she'd already applied to several of them using my information. And she was planning to put me in the cheapest option available. The financial planning folder was even more revealing. Inside, I found detailed spreadsheets showing what she thought were my assets and income. She'd calculated my Social Security, my small pension from the hospital, and estimated the value of my house. According to her calculations, I had barely enough to afford a few years at one of the cheaper facilities before I'd need to apply for Medicaid. What she didn't know, what wasn't on any of her spreadsheets, was the investment account I'd been building for 30 years. The account my financial advisor had helped me establish when I first started working as a nurse, when I was determined to never be dependent on anyone. Every month I'd put away what I could. Sometimes it was just $50, sometimes more when I worked overtime. I'd lived modestly, driven used cars, clipped coupons, all so I could build something for my future. Over 3 decades, with compound interest and careful investments, that account had grown to just over $2 million. I'd never told Milani about it because I'd always planned to leave it to her. It was going to be a surprise, a gift that would set her up for life. Now I realized that if she'd known about it, I probably would have been in one of those facilities months ago. But it was the folder labeled Legal Documents that truly shocked me. Inside were photocopies of my will, my power of attorney forms, and my advance directive. All documents I'd signed years ago, when Milani was in college and I thought it was just responsible estate planning. I'd named her as my power of attorney for both financial and medical decisions should I become incapacitated. At the time, she was my only child, my closest family member. It had seemed like the natural choice. Now I saw how dangerous that decision had become. Attached to the power of attorney document was a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of, dated just 2 weeks ago. I read it with growing horror. Dear Ms. Milani Henderson Walsh, thank you for consulting with our firm regarding the process of having your mother declared legally incompetent. As we discussed, establishing a pattern of declining mental capacity will be crucial for any court proceedings. We recommend documenting specific instances of confusion, poor judgment, or inability to care for herself. Medical records showing cognitive decline would also be helpful, as would testimony from neighbors, caregivers, or medical professionals who have observed concerning behavior. Please compile this documentation and schedule a follow-up appointment at your earliest convenience. My vision blurred as I read the letter twice, then a third time. Milani wasn't just planning to put me in a home. She was planning to have me declared legally incompetent so she could take control of all my assets and decisions. Everything made sense now. The lies about my confusion, the isolation from friends and family, the exaggerated reports of my physical limitations. She'd been building a case against me, collecting evidence to support her claim that I couldn't take care of myself. The sound of a car door slamming outside made me quickly return everything to its proper place. Mrs. Patterson was making her afternoon check. "Sherry, dear, how are you feeling?" she called from the front door. "Much better, thank you," I called back, my voice somehow steady, despite the rage and fear coursing through me. After she left, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone. I needed help, but who could I trust? Milani had systematically undermined my credibility with everyone who knew me. If I told them what I'd discovered, would they believe me? Or would they think I was having one of the episodes Milani had been describing? I thought about calling my sister Janet, but Milani had been intercepting my calls for weeks. If I suddenly reached out with wild accusations, it might actually support Milani's claims about my mental state. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to build my own case, gather my own evidence, and I needed to move fast. Because when Milani returned from Denver in 2 days, I had a feeling she was going to escalate her timeline. The look in her eyes during our last conversation had been calculating, impatient. She was tired of waiting for me to cooperate, but she had made one crucial mistake in her planning. She'd underestimated her target. I wasn't the helpless, confused old woman she needed me to be, and I was about to prove it. Milani returned from Denver with a new sense of urgency that was impossible to miss. She'd barely set her suitcase down before she was making phone calls, scheduling appointments, and moving through my house with the efficiency of someone executing a well-rehearsed plan. "Mom, I've got some good news," she announced over breakfast the morning after her return. "I was able to move up your appointment with Dr. Martinez to this afternoon, and I've arranged for someone very special to meet us there." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "Someone special?" "A geriatric specialist, Dr. Chen. She's going to do a comprehensive evaluation of your cognitive function and overall care needs." The trap was closing. This wasn't a medical appointment. It was the next step in building her incompetency case. Dr. Chen was probably the expert witness Milani's lawyer had recommended. "I don't need a geriatric specialist," I said calmly. "Dr. Martinez has been my doctor for 15 years. "But Mom, Dr. Martinez is a general practitioner. Dr. Chen specializes in age-related cognitive issues. She'll be able to give us a much better picture of your situation, my situation, not my health, not my recovery, my situation. And after this evaluation?" Milani's eyes lit up with false enthusiasm. "Well, depending on what Dr. Chen recommends, we might be able to fast-track your application to Sunset Manor. They had a cancellation, and there's an opening next month." Next month. She was planning to have me institutionalized within 30 days. "I see. And you've already filled out the application?" A brief hesitation. "I just wanted to be prepared, in case the evaluation shows that you need more support than I can provide at home." I nodded slowly, stirring my coffee with deliberate calm. "That's very thoughtful of you, dear." The appointment was at 2 o'clock. At 1:30, Milani was pacing nervously, checking her watch and organizing a folder of documents I wasn't supposed to know she had. "Mom, are you ready? We should leave soon." "Actually, I need to make a quick stop at the bank first. I need to handle some paperwork." Her face tightened. "Can't it wait? We don't want to be late for Dr. Chen." "It'll just take a few minutes. I need to update my account information." What I really needed was to have my financial advisor, Robert Mills, meet us at Dr. Martinez's office. I'd called him that morning and explained the situation. He'd been shocked, then furious, then grimly determined to help me protect myself. At the bank, I deliberately took my time, watching Milani grow more agitated by the minute. She kept checking her phone, tapping her foot, shooting worried glances at the clock. "Mom, we really need to go." "Just finishing up," I said pleasantly. We arrived at Dr. Martinez's office exactly on time. In the waiting room sat a woman I didn't recognize. Asian, early 50s, expensive suit, briefcase at her feet. Dr. Chen, presumably. But sitting next to her was Robert Mills, my financial advisor for the past 20 years. A tall, silver-haired man with the kind of authoritative presence that commanded respect. Milani stopped short when she saw him. "Mom, who is that?" "That's Robert Mills, my financial advisor. I thought he should be here for this evaluation, since you seem so concerned about my ability to handle my affairs." The color drained from Milani's face. "Your financial advisor? You never mentioned." "There are a lot of things I haven't mentioned, dear." Dr. Chen stood up, extending her hand. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm Dr. Chen. I understand there are some concerns about your cognitive function and living situation." I shook her hand firmly. "Actually, Dr. Chen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. My daughter seems to be under the impression that I'm incompetent and need to be placed in a facility. I'd like to clear that up." Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway of his office, looking confused. Sherry? Milani? What's all this about a geriatric evaluation? I have you down for a routine follow-up on your hip surgery. That's correct, I said loudly enough for everyone in the waiting room to hear. I'm here for my surgical follow-up. I have no idea why my daughter thought I needed a cognitive evaluation. Milani's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But Mom, you've been so confused lately. Have I? I turned to Dr. Martinez. Doctor, during my recovery, have you observed any signs of confusion or cognitive decline? Dr. Martinez frowned. None whatsoever. Your recovery has been textbook normal. You've been alert, oriented, following all post-operative instructions perfectly. I turned to Robert Mills. Robert, would you mind explaining to everyone here about my financial situation? My daughter seems to think I'm living on Social Security and a small pension. Robert opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Certainly. Mrs. Henderson, as of yesterday's closing, your investment portfolio is valued at $227,000. Your annual income from these investments alone is approximately $85,000, not including your Social Security and pension benefits. The silence in the waiting room was deafening. Dr. Chen looked from Milani to me, clearly recalculating the situation. Dr. Martinez raised his eyebrows in surprise, but it was Milani's face that told the whole story. Shock, followed by rage, followed by a desperate scrambling to regain control. That's impossible, she said, her voice shrill. Mom, you never told me about any investments. I never told you about a lot of things, including the fact that I know about your consultations with the law firm about having me declared incompetent. Dr. Chen set down her briefcase. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding here. Mrs. Henderson, your daughter contacted me because she was concerned about your ability to live independently and manage your affairs. She indicated you were showing signs of cognitive decline and poor judgment. And what assessment did you base that on? Dr. Chen looked uncomfortable. Well, I hadn't actually met with you yet. I was relying on the information provided by your daughter. I turned to Milani, who was now visibly trembling. Tell them about the insurance, Milani. Tell them how you've been lying to your husband about paying for my physical therapy when it's completely covered. I don't know what you're talking about. Tell them about the applications you filled out to assisted living facilities, with my forged signature. Milani's face was ashen now. Mom, you're having one of your episodes. Tell them about the lies you've been spreading to my friends and neighbors about my supposed memory problems and confusion. Robert Mills cleared his throat. If I may, I've known Mrs. Henderson for 20 years. She's one of the sharpest, most financially savvy clients I've ever worked with. The idea that she's incompetent is not only false, it's laughable. Dr. Chen picked up her briefcase. I think I've heard enough. Mrs. Henderson, you clearly don't need a geriatric evaluation. Ms. Walsh, I think you may want to reconsider your concerns about your mother. As Dr. Chen left, Milani finally exploded. How could you do this to me? I'm trying to help you. No, I said quietly. You're trying to control me. You're trying to steal from me. And you're trying to lock me away so you can get your hands on assets you didn't even know existed. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. I think we should postpone this appointment. Mrs. Henderson, you seem to be handling your affairs quite well. I see no medical reason why you can't continue living independently. As we walked to the parking lot, Milani grabbed my arm. Mom, please, let me explain. I stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her. The daughter I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. There's nothing to explain, Milani. I know exactly what you were trying to do. The question is, what are you going to do now? 3 weeks later, I was standing in the showroom of Premier RV Sales, running my hand along the sleek exterior of a 2023 Winnebago Travato. The salesman, an enthusiastic young man named Brad, was explaining the features with barely contained excitement. This model has everything you need for extended travel, Mrs. Henderson. Full kitchen, comfortable sleeping area, excellent storage, and the reliability Winnebago is famous for. Behind me, I could hear Robert Mills asking practical questions about insurance and warranty coverage. After the confrontation at Dr. Martinez's office, I'd asked Robert to help me make some major life changes. He'd been more than happy to assist. The scene with Milani that day had been ugly. After I'd exposed her plan, she'd tried everything: tears, threats, guilt, manipulation. She'd accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, and mentally unstable. She'd threatened to contest my competency in court anyway. That's when Robert had stepped in with his own attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Wong who specialized in elder law. Patricia had made it clear to Milani that any attempt to pursue conservatorship would not only fail spectacularly, but could result in criminal charges for the forged documents and fraud. Milani had left my house that night and hadn't returned. Derek had called once, awkwardly trying to mediate, but I'd made it clear that unless my daughter was prepared to acknowledge what she'd done and make genuine amends, I had nothing to say to either of them. "The solar panels are a nice touch," Robert was saying, examining the RV's roof. "You'll be able to camp off-grid for days without worry." I smiled, imagining myself parked beside a lake somewhere, reading a book in the morning sun without anyone telling me I was too confused to understand it. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of legal and financial activity. Patricia had helped me revoke the old power of attorney documents and create new ones, naming Robert as my financial power of attorney and my sister Janet as my medical proxy. I'd updated my will, removing Milani as my primary beneficiary and establishing a trust that would benefit my grandchildren directly when they reached adulthood. I'd also changed all my passwords, updated my emergency contacts, and informed all my doctors about what had happened. Dr. Martinez had been appalled and had documented everything thoroughly, creating a medical record that would protect me from any future competency challenges. But the most liberating change was the simplest one. I'd gotten my life back. "I'll take it," I told Brad, who nearly dropped his clipboard in excitement. "Excellent choice. When would you like to take delivery?" "As soon as possible. I have places to go." 2 days later, I was loading my belongings into my new mobile home. I wasn't taking much: clothes, books, photos, and a few precious mementos. The furniture would go to charity. The house would be sold, adding even more to my investment portfolio. Mrs. Patterson came over to say goodbye, still shaking her head in amazement at everything that had transpired. "I can't believe what that girl was planning," she said for the dozenth time. "And here I was, helping her spy on you without even knowing it." "You were being a good neighbor," I assured her. "You couldn't have known." But 68 years old and hitting the road in an RV? Sherry, I have to admire your courage. Courage. It was funny how doing what I wanted with my own life and money was considered courageous. But maybe it was, when you'd spent so many years letting other people's expectations define your choices. My sister Janet arrived just as I was doing my final walkthrough. She'd flown in from Phoenix, still processing everything I'd told her about Milani's betrayal. "I should have known something was wrong when she kept making excuses for why you couldn't come to the phone," Janet said, giving me a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry I didn't push harder to talk to you directly." "Don't apologize." She was very convincing. She had me half convinced I was losing my mind. And now? I looked around the house where I'd raised my daughter, where I'd lived for 30 years, where I'd been slowly suffocating under the weight of other people's plans for my future. Now I feel more like myself than I have in decades. The RV was easier to drive than I'd expected. After a few practice runs around town, I felt confident enough for my first real journey. I'd plotted a route that would take me through national parks, small towns, and scenic highways I'd always wanted to explore. My first stop was the Grand Canyon, something I'd talked about visiting for years but never made time for. As I set up camp at the South Rim, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of gold and red, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced since before my surgery. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Milani, but it was from Mrs. Patterson. "Saw your house sold already. Hope you're having adventures. Send photos." I snapped a picture of the canyon and sent it back with the message, "Day 3 of freedom. It's beautiful here." Over the following weeks, I drove through Utah's Red Rock country, camped beside lakes in Colorado, and spent peaceful mornings in New Mexico watching hot air balloons drift across the sky. I met other RV travelers, joined campfire conversations, and rediscovered the joy of meeting new people without anyone monitoring my interactions. In each new place, I sent postcards to friends I'd lost touch with during Milani's isolation campaign. I called my sister from mountaintops and desert valleys, sharing my adventures and rebuilding connections that had been severed. 2 months into my journey, I received an unexpected call from Derek. "Sherry, I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. I had no idea what Milani was really planning. If I'd known about the forged documents and the lies, "Where is she now?" I asked. We're getting divorced. Once I understood what she'd been doing to you, I realized she'd been manipulating me too. I can't be married to someone capable of that level of deception." I felt a surprising pang of sympathy for Derek. He'd been used just as much as I had. "I'm sorry your marriage is ending." "I'm not," he said quietly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see who she really was." After we hung up, I sat outside my RV watching the sunset over Monument Valley. I thought about the daughter I'd raised, wondering where I'd gone wrong, what I could have done differently. But those thoughts no longer consumed me the way they once had. Some people, I'd learned, will try to control and diminish you, regardless of how much you love them. The healthy response isn't to keep sacrificing yourself in hopes they'll change. It's to protect yourself and build a life they can't touch. As I write this, I'm camped beside a lake in Montana, planning my route to Alaska. At 68, I'm discovering that life doesn't end when your children disappoint you, or when your body requires some extra care. It just changes direction. I've learned to trust my own judgment again. I've reclaimed my independence. And every morning when I wake up in a new place, with no one telling me I'm too old, too confused, or too much trouble, I feel grateful for the courage it took to save myself. Tomorrow, I'll point my home toward new horizons. The road stretches endlessly ahead, full of possibilities I'm finally free to explore. Some people might call it running away. I call it running toward the life I should have been living all along. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.